Coming up on today's episode, we take a look at the next installment in the Ghostbusters franchise, Frozen Empire.
Power to kill by fear itself.
Like literally scared to death?
Stay tuned. Welcome to Scary World, where we walk you through the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I am your host, Arturo Padilla.
Hi.
Before we get started, remember, this is a spoiler-free show.
I'm not going to spoil the surprise.
Now that we got that out of the way,
We got some rules around here.
keep in mind, there are 5 categories: production, story, ensemble, horror, and legacy. Each category can score up to 2 points.
Showtime.
Per IMDb, the synopsis goes, when the discovery of an ancient artifact unleashes an evil force,
Evil dies tonight!
Ghostbusters, new and old, must join forces to protect their home
Michael, go home!
and save the world from a second ice age.
Ice Age!
Production.
Look at me!
This movie was directed by Gil Kenan. He previously directed the Poltergeist remake and the very underrated animated film Monster House, one of my favorites and my kids' favorites too. Aside from his previous work, he also helped out with the script for Ghostbusters Afterlife. This movie is technically sound. It looks good. Everything is framed and composed very well. The movie is polished. It looks clean. It looks crisp. It looks as you would expect from a movie of this budget and size, honestly. The movie overall is edited well. It's pieced together very well. I do have some gripes when it comes to a couple of the CGI. For instance, right off the bat, in the opening sequence, you get some really weird looking CGI landscape. I'm curious as to why they didn't use an actual location as they did with the rest of the movie. So that was a really odd choice. Also, one of the ghost hands look really weird. Slimer, to be specific, looks really odd. There are several camera techniques that Kenan uses throughout the movie to help elevate the scenes. For instance, right when you meet the crew, you get a nice tracking shot of them getting ready to go out on a mission, and it looks really fun. It helps the audience stay engaged with the scene and helps eyes also stay engaged with the location and to be able to kind of just look around a little bit more and see any Easter eggs here and there. And for that, this movie gets a 1 for production. It looks as you'd expect visually. Nice, crisp, polished, ready for the summer blockbuster season. Story.
Second act needs work.
The story was written by Gil Kenan as well as Jason Reitman. Gil Kenan, as mentioned in the previous section, helped with Ghostbusters Afterlife, and Reitman as well helped in writing the script for Afterlife. Kenan has full duties here, and the script has issues, but the core concept of the movie is actually a good one. I really liked the idea they came up with. Unfortunately, everything around it kind of suffers. First off, this movie suffers from very poor pacing. It drags extremely throughout the first couple of acts, and it doesn't help that the dialogue is bad as well. To top that all off, it's not funny. This movie is not funny. As hard as it tries to get you to, crack up, to get a good laugh out of you, it doesn't work. There's nothing really funny about this stuff. The dialogue and the jokes are all dated and they don't hit. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, you would get the proper reaction that the filmmakers were expecting. But in 2024, a lot of this stuff was not funny. It didn't come off well. The delivery also didn't help, but we'll get to the delivery of stuff in a little while. But yeah, folks, this wasn't good in terms of comedy and what you would want and expect from a Ghostbusters movie. I feel that they tried too hard, and ultimately this whole entire movie and experience feels very forced because of it. That being said, as mentioned, the villain they created for this story was interesting and was something unique and special, and we should have had a lot more of him and a lot more of what this villain is capable of. And for that villain alone, this movie gets a 1 for story. Ensemble. This is where my biggest problem lies with this movie. The characters and the cast. Unfortunately, none of it works. Just like the comedy, none of it clicks. The characters are really weak, man. You got some weak ass characters in this movie, unfortunately. They have poor dynamics and they're underdeveloped across the board. Several characters in this movie are just there just to be there and get a paycheck, honestly. Bill Murray's character, very useless in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really do anything at all, comes in, just does what the trailer does, says his couple lines and he's done. I'm not sure why he was thrown into the mix. I understand nostalgia and fan service, but there comes a point where you have to look back and look at the overall picture and ask yourself, are you servicing the story here? You really weren't with that. The mom and Paul Rudd's character also have a very minimal role here, unfortunately. The entire family dynamics are off in this movie, unlike in Afterlife, where that was one of the main attractions of that movie, and the selling point was the dynamics and the relationships formed and developed between this family. Here, we get none of that. The story focuses on Phoebe, but even then, they don't do Phoebe justice by going through with the story I felt they should have. I don't want to spoil that for you guys, but I feel there is a relationship that should have been developed a lot more in order to explain what happens in Act 3 a little better, and in order to connect with the characters more. The cast, folks, the entire cast phoned it in. Honestly, the only ones that really kind of did anything in terms of standout performance, maybe Ernie Hudson as Winston Zeddemore. Dan Aykroyd did his thing. I'm really disappointed with McKenna Grace's performance. She's usually very awesome in most things she does. She's a very talented actress, but here she just feels like she's going through the motions. I feel like the character was underwritten, and unfortunately that comes through in McKenna Grace's performance. The underwriting comes through in everyone's performance, honestly. Paul Rudd is not really, a very Paul Rudd kind of character here. He's given these one-liners that only one of them kind of hits, and that's the one in the commercial where he quotes, "Busting makes me feel good."
We're the Ghostbusters. Can I tell you something else? What? Busting makes me feel good. Makes me feel good.
And that was one of the highlight of the comedy lines, I guess. Other than that, there was not much for him to chew on. And this is a really disappointing factor of this movie, because this is why I signed up for this sequel. For more of the family dynamics, more of that relationship, more of the character work. And unfortunately, we got none of that here, and I'm very disappointed in that. And for that, it gets a big fat 0 for Ensemble. Horror.
I'm scared.
Obviously, there's not going to be a lot of blood and gore in this movie, being a Ghostbusters vehicle. But what there was in this movie was some very cool character design. Our villain specifically, Garrick. He had a really cool look to him. I loved the horns. I love the fact that he was introduced first with horns, and then he came up with another form.
Commanding army of ghosts.
And then he was able to put those horns right back on. I thought that was really cool, really clever. I liked the look of it. The CG used for it was very good. I know there was some puppetry as well involved with Garrick, and I think that was really brilliant move. I think this is why he looks so good. But that is where the compliment stops. Unfortunately, we didn't get enough of that. What is going on here? This is Ghostbusters. There was barely any ghosts to bust here. What's up with that, folks? Man, that was really disappointing. For instance, in the first Ghostbusters movie, the original one, where there was the Zool story, but then because of Zool, there was all these other ghosts that, came out and were causing chaos. This should have been the same situation here. The containment system, obviously, as you saw in the trailer, the containment system, it didn't work, right? It doesn't work, and Garrett gets here, and he doesn't have any minions. He doesn't really have an army with him. As the trailer says, it's very underwhelming, honestly. And I wish they did a better job of giving us some more of that ghost action. If not more of the ghost action, more of the Garrick action. He needed to be in the movie a heck of a lot more than he was, especially in his last physical form. We needed more different kind of ghost designs. The ones we did get really weren't impressive at all besides Garrick. And for that, and the unfortunate fact that we get very little ghost action, this movie only gets a 1 for horror, unfortunately. Legacy.
Well, what do you think?
I really wanted to like this movie, man. I really did. I really enjoyed watching Afterlife when it came out a couple of years ago, and I thought I would feel the same about this one. Unfortunately, nothing clicked. Nothing hit the same as it did in Afterlife. That magic, that spark that it had was not a part of this production, unfortunately. It was boring. It wasn't very funny. The dialogue was very dated. In fact, I actually brought my kids with me to the movie. They enjoyed the movie for what it was. They liked it. They did think it was a little bit boring in the middle of it. My son really liked Garrick. He wanted to see more of the villain. And I agree. This movie, unfortunately, had a huge lull in the second act. There was a lot of exposition here, but I feel the exposition went nowhere. We didn't get payoffs for a lot of the stuff they started introducing in this story. The relationship between McKenna Grace and the ghost that she meets in the park, that could have been further developed. The chemistry between the family could have been further developed. It was just not good. This is an issue that a lot of people have with remakes and sequels and reboots and all that stuff. I don't mind them as long as what you're doing is interesting and unique, different, something we haven't seen before. You're going out of the norm, out of the box to try and do something different within the framework of this universe. This is not it. Afterlife was it. And Afterlife should have been it. It should have stopped there. Installments like these is what really ends up hurting the integrity of the entire franchise. If you don't have a proper story, then just don't make one. That's my final opinion on that. And for Legacy, this movie gets, unfortunately, a big fat 0. To tally it up, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire received a 1 for production, a 1 for story, a 0 for ensemble, a 1 for horror, and a 0 for legacy, bringing its total up to 3. It's not what you want, folks. 3 out of 10 is a bad score. That being said, this movie did have some elements that could be extracted to make a really solid movie here. I don't understand why they opted to take the low-hanging fruit, to take the road more traveled here, instead of going for something unique, something different that I think that would have turned out way more memorable and more impactful. I think they chickened out and they just wanted to do a bunch of fan service, honestly. As I mentioned before in the ensemble segment, Bill Murray I love Bill Murray, but he does no good in this movie. He does absolutely nothing in this movie. 0. Nothing. The involvement of Ernie Hudson as Winston Zeddemore and Dan Aykroyd as Ray, that is understandable and explained and very logical, but this movie kind of takes logic and throws it in the garbage for a little while, unfortunately. This was a disappointment, and that's really all I can say. As we say on the morgue, stay away from this one.
Can you tell me what time it is?
And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you for watching Scary World. Don't forget to drop a comment down below and hit the thumbs up on the video. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, most importantly. Tell your friends, your buddies, your families, and their pets to come to the channel, subscribe to CorpseFeed, and enjoy the content. We have spoiler-free horror movie reviews for you guys, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and we have the official CorpseFeed podcast dropping on Tuesdays anywhere you get your podcast streams. Go check that out, folks. We are also on all the social feeds. We are there. We will see you on Monday for another episode. And remember, it's a scary world out there, but we are here to walk you through it.
I just wanted to say goodbye.